Okay guys, welcome. I'm Marek and this is another episode of Photoshop Lightroom TV, your weekly video podcast about anything Photoshop, Lightroom, photography and W-Lit as well. As you know, the Creative Suite, well not Creative Suite, Creative Cloud Suite is coming on soon, Adobe Creative Cloud, so Photoshop CC. But just before the Photoshop CC comes out, we still got Photoshop CS6. And we also have the Lightroom 5 beta. Now let me start with a Photoshop tutorial. And this will be a tutorial about highlights and shadows adjustment in Photoshop. As you know, you can find highlights and shadows on the image adjustments menu. But as you also know, you can't find it in the adjustments panel. It's not there. So if you're thinking you can't add shadows and highlights as an adjustment layer, you'll be wrong. But there's a trick to it, and I'm going to show you this trick. One of the things we've been missing from here are shadows and highlights. Okay? You normally find them here, image, adjustments, shadows and highlights, and it's a really interesting adjustment. Obviously not like that. I've seen so many people telling me that they try to use shadows and highlights, but when it opens like that, they look at it, well, looks a bit better, but just the sliders, that's very limiting. And what I do is they cancel and they never use it again. And I'm explaining in detail shadows and highlights in my Photoshop book that's coming out soon. More information's on my website, marekmularczyk.com, or on my blog, PhotoshopLightroomTV as well. So with the more options tagged in here, there's so many options and you can make your image really better. But what we're missing here is, if I just click OK, let's say, is the adjustment being applied to the background layer, to the image of the layer. So what I was looking for was a way to apply it as an adjustment layer. A separate layer that could be re-edited, readjusted, and so it doesn't alter the original pixels. So here's what you can do. What you do is, because shadows and highlights is not in here. So what you do is you convert a layer with the image to a smart object. And you can do it a number of ways. You could right click on it, convert to smart object. Okay. That's another way. One way. So now the image becomes a smart object in here. We can see by this icon that it's a smart object. Okay. Just close it. Okay. Here we go. And now we'll go to image, adjustments. All the adjustments are grayed out. Okay, because it's a smart object. But shadows and highlights is available here. So click shadows and highlights. I'm going to adjust it. Well, I'm going to, let's say, with the shadows, I'm going to keep the amount quite low. I'll keep the tonal width quite narrow, and I'll increase the radius a bit. Okay, you can see it here. With the highlights, I'm going to keep them as they are, and I'll just click OK for now. And now this becomes kind of like a smart filter. So smart filters, but this is shadows and highlights adjustment. This is not a filter. You won't find shadows and highlights anywhere on the filter menu. And because it looks like a layer effect, like a layer style, you can double click on it to reopen it and re-edit it. And Photoshop remembers all your settings in here. Okay, so did you enjoy it? I hope you did. This is a great tutorial I've learned from one of the friends, one of the Adobe instructors, This is really good. Now, just to have a balance, I thought I would create another video tutorial in Lightroom for a change. And obviously, since we've got Lightroom 5 beta, I'll be using Lightroom 5 beta. What am I going to show you? I'm going to show you an overview of the curves in Lightroom 5 beta, or in Lightroom in general, with some hidden features in curves, but also something interesting you can create with lens corrections, or distortions, shall we call it. So let me show you what I mean. You're going to love that. Let's jump into Lightroom 5 beta. So let me just open one of the images, maybe this one here. Okay. I'm just going to open it in Develop module. Right. I'll start the lens corrections. As you already know, as you probably know, with the lens corrections, you can enable profile corrections, and Lightroom will try to detect the metadata from the image, what camera and what lens were used, and will try to fix any distortions. Okay. So what you do first is you tick Enable Profile Corrections. Well, what do you do if Lightroom doesn't detect metadata from the file? Well, if you took the photo, you probably know what camera or lens you use, so you could go to Canon or Nikon or Sigma and choose the lens you used. But did you know that you can also create some interesting distortion effects with the profile corrections? Let me show you what I mean. This photo was actually taken on the Canon camera, but I used a Sigma lens. So what I did here is I went to Sigma, and how about that? Now this wasn't the lens I used. By default, Lightroom used here a profile for 4.5mm lens, but look what an amazing effect it created. I really like it. It's really, really good. Okay. Or you can have a look on some other presets. The fisheye lenses will look the best. I especially like this one here, the 4.5mm. Really, really interesting effect. So have a look on the lens corrections and play with it. I'm just going to disable that for now, and I want to show you something interesting in tone curves. In the tone curve, there's loads of things you can do. For starters, you could use the point curve drop-down menu, and you can cycle through different contrast settings. Okay. You could also use the sliders. I know many users who use sliders here. Okay. Or you could work on the actual histogram here, like in curves inside Photoshop. So you could click and drag in here. Maybe in the shadow, in the midtones, I'm going to brighten them just a bit, looking at the tree trunk here. With the highlights, I'm actually going to darken them a bit. Here we go. Maybe here as well. And it does move the sliders for you. Okay. But here's another thing you can do. I'm just going to undo the last few steps. Okay. And I'm going to use this TAT tool, Target Adjustment tool. So click on it. And then as you move the cursor over the image, you can see whether you're over the shadows or highlights or midtones. Even saying here, darks, shadows, lights, and you can work on the actual image. So if I click and start dragging upwards here on the tree, I'll make it brighter. Here we go. Then on the highlights, I'm going to make them darker. So just click and drag down to make them a bit darker. Here we go. Maybe this a bit brighter. And this creates or bends the curve for you, like exactly the same way as the same tool, the TAT tool, does in Photoshop. Okay. And finally, back to the point curve. Did you notice this icon in here? Did you know that you can actually click on it to collapse the sliders if you don't need them? And you can access the channels to go to the RGB composite, or you could also target channels. Like for example, I think this image will look a bit better if we brought in a bit more yellows, just to make it a bit warmer. So I can target the blue channel here, and I can lower the blues and bring in yellows at the same time. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this Lightroom 5 beta tutorial. And that's it for this week, I'm afraid. Yeah, this is PhotoshopLightroomTV. I hope you enjoyed it. Just one more thing before you leave. Remember about Adobe's tour. The Adobe Evangelists for Creative Cloud are on tour again. And I know they're in London next week. I think they're on Monday in London. But they're also going all over the world. So if you have time, make sure you check out the Adobe website, or have a look at my blog, PhotoshopLightroomBridge.co.uk. You'll find a link in there and all the information you need. Register. It's a free event. Make sure you don't miss it. Otherwise, thank you for watching. This was Photoshop Lightroom TV. I'm your host, Marek Mularczyk, from MarekMularczyk.com. And see you soon. Bye bye.